The wind over Texas no longer carries only dust, it hums with propellers. What happens when the battlefield of tomorrow lands on American soil? In February 2025, reports from Homeland Security confirmed what agents had feared for months. Mexican drug cartels are arming commercial drones with explosives, launching them toward U.S. Border Patrol outposts. According to Reuters and BBC investigations, at least 3 attempted strikes near El Paso and Fronton were intercepted. One drone carried shrapnel packed into a soda can. Another, captured intact, was rigged with a chemical irritant canister. The border, once policed through fences and patrol trucks, has become a low-altitude war zone. Law enforcement units now move under floodlights and radar nets, their eyes split between ground shadows and the ominous whine above. Trump's second-term directive, Operation Sentinel Sky, authorizes ICE and CBP to engage any aerial threat within 5 miles of the frontier. Soldiers call it the new sound of fear. Strategic analysts from Jane's Defense Weekly describe it as the drone insurgency model, cheap, disposable, decentralized. Cartels learned from conflicts in Ukraine, Syria, and Gaza, where swarms of small drones overwhelmed expensive air defenses. The same tactics once seen in Donetsk or Rafah now echo over the Rio Grande. DW's security desk notes the psychological power behind these attacks. Drones are not meant to destroy infrastructure, they're meant to erode morale. Each unidentified buzz forces agents to hesitate to wonder whether death or disinformation hovers above them. Meanwhile, the Trump administration expands surveillance grids along the border, deploying AI-driven Sky Sentinel sensors adapted from U.S. Marine operations in the Persian Gulf. Defense News reports that these systems can track objects the size of a bird up to 10 kilometers away, yet as one Homeland Security officer admitted, for every drone we detect 2 more slip through. In Al Jazeera's coverage from Ciudad Juarez, locals speak of nights pierced by silent flashes, drones used for both smuggling and intimidation. A former cartel logistics coordinator told investigators fear is more valuable than money. If the Americans panic, our message wins. The escalation mirrors a global truth. Asymmetric warfare is no longer bound by geography. From Iranian proxy groups launching loitering munitions in the Gulf to China's AI-driven reconnaissance drones shadowing U.S. fleets in the Pacific, technology has blurred the line between soldier and saboteur. In this new era, borders are not drawn in sand, they're written in code and circuitry. Every drone crossing the Rio Grande is a message. Power no longer belongs to those with the biggest army, but to those who can weaponize the smallest machine. And so, as floodlights slice through the desert night, one question remains: how does a nation defend its sovereignty when its enemies no longer march, but fly unseen? A red light flickers in the Situation Room. The president watches a live feed from a Reaper drone circling above Tamaulipas. In the crosshairs, a cartel convoy carrying explosives and fentanyl moving toward the Rio Grande. The order comes in 3 words: engage. No warnings. Under President Donald Trump's Homeland Security Enhancement Directive, America's border war has entered its most aggressive phase since 2001. This isn't just immigration control, it's a counterinsurgency. According to BBC and Defense News, joint task forces of ICE, CBP, and the National Guard now operate under unified command backed by real-time satellite intelligence. A new fusion center in San Antonio coordinates everything from drone strikes to electronic jamming, transforming the southern border into one of the most surveilled regions on Earth. In the past year, Reuters confirms over 5,000 cartel operatives have been arrested in U.S. territory, yet officials privately admit the victory is temporary. For every cell we dismantle, says one DHS source, another pops up across the river. The cartels, fragmented but fearless, now act less like smugglers and more like paramilitary forces using encrypted radio jammers and decoy drones modeled after those seen in Ukraine and Gaza. To counter the threat, Washington authorized Operation Lone Shield, a cross-agency initiative modeled on NATO's hybrid warfare doctrine. AI-guided interceptors track aerial intrusions, while mobile anti-drone cannons guard key checkpoints. DW reports that private defense firms, including Lockheed Martin and Anduril, have rushed prototype systems to Texas under emergency contracts. It's the first time in modern history, notes Jane's Defense Weekly, that such advanced counter-UAS technology is used inside U.S. borders. But America's militarization raises uncomfortable parallels abroad. In the same month, Trump's directive expanded surveillance authority, protests erupted in Tel Aviv and Warsaw over the growing use of automated defense systems in civilian zones. Al Jazeera commentators warn that the U.S. might be normalizing perpetual emergency powers under the guise of border defense, echoing tactics seen in conflict-ridden regions where fear justifies control. Inside, Washington debate intensifies. The Guardian's editorial board cautions that America risks trading liberty for the illusion of safety as citizens near the border report drones flying overhead without clear identification. Some American, some cartel, some simply unknown. Yet for Trump's supporters, this is precisely the point: deterrence through dominance. As one administration official told Reuters, "We're not negotiating with cartels, we're erasing them." Still, the cost of this campaign extends far beyond the desert. US-Mexico relations have cooled to their lowest point in decades, and trade discussions with Beijing have faltered amid accusations that Chinese-made drone components have reached Sinaloa through black markets. Intelligence intercepts suggest Iranian advisors may be assisting cartel engineers in developing loitering munitions mimicking Tehran's proxy strategy in the Middle East. Washington's retaliation strategy, though ruthless, carries a paradox: the harder the hammer falls, the faster new enemies adapt. America may dominate the skies, but can dominance alone secure peace? The sound of the drones is changing. Cartel engineers have learned to disguise their frequencies, blending into the noise of civilian networks. Near Nogales, Arizona, an American surveillance drone recently picked up a formation of 5 quadcopters flying in a V pattern like birds. By the time ground patrols locked in, they were gone. Intelligence briefings leaked to Reuters reveal a troubling evolution. Cartels have built underground workshops near Monterrey and Reynosa, assembling drones from parts smuggled through Chinese e-commerce suppliers. Some carry small grenades, others deploy smokescreens to mask convoys crossing the Rio Grande. The technology is crude but effective proof that innovation thrives in chaos. Jane's Defense Weekly notes that cartel tactics increasingly mirror guerrilla warfare methods tested in Donbass and northern Syria. Analysts call it hybrid decentralization. Each cell acts independently, but feeds data into shared networks through encrypted satellite phones. One captured communications device contained both Spanish and Persian code words, traces of Iranian military encryption software once sold to Houthi groups. The implication is chilling global arms trade patterns now bleed directly into the American homeland. On the Mexican side, President López Obrador's successor faces mounting pressure from Washington to purge corrupt officials. 10,000 troops have been deployed to border states, yet according to BBC and DW investigations, many of those same units have financial ties to the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels. Several officers were caught selling drone jamming equipment intended for US-Mexico joint operations. Al Jazeera reports that cartel informants are embedded inside Mexico's National Guard, leaking US patrol schedules in exchange for cryptocurrency. In El Paso, a veteran ICE commander tells reporters that the cartels think like insurgents. They rotate smugglers, weekly use teenagers as signal decoys, and flood social media with deep fake propaganda showing fabricated US drone strikes on civilians. The goal is psychological dominance, turning fear into recruitment. Meanwhile, corruption gnaws from within. The Guardian exposes an internal audit revealing that millions in seized cartel funds never reached federal accounts, suggesting an underground economy thriving even within law enforcement ranks. Congressional hearings have begun under Trump's directive for Operation Iron Veil, aiming to root out internal sabotage and financial leaks. The danger, say defense news analysts, is that the border may become a mirror of the wars it seeks to prevent. The same tools America uses to defend itself, surveillance, automation, private contracting, are now being cloned by its enemies. The cartels learned from Ukraine, writes military expert Daniel Davis. They watched the world adapt to drone warfare and then brought the battlefield home. Global parallels deepen the unease. Iranian militias in Iraq have used identical consumer-grade drones to strike US outposts. In the South China Sea, Chinese Coast Guard swarms employ similar low-altitude harassment tactics against Philippine vessels. The blueprint of border warfare has become the DNA of global conflict. Back in Texas, a Border Patrol agent scans the horizon. The desert looks quiet, but every shimmer might be metal. Every gust might hide a camera. The old rules where law and war were separate no longer apply. If the lines between law enforcement, insurgency, and espionage dissolve, who then controls the truth? It began as a rumor on Capitol Hill, a return to an ancient American law once used against pirates. But now the letters of marque and reprisal proposal from Senator Mike Lee has exploded into one of Washington's most divisive debates. Could private contractors be the answer to a war the US government can't seem to end? Reuters confirmed the bill's submission in early April 2025. It would grant legal authority to private firms or individuals to hunt down and capture cartel operatives, seize smuggling assets, and destroy narco infrastructure. Their payment, a share of whatever they confiscate. To its supporters, including several members of Trump's National Security Council, it's a cost-effective way to bypass bureaucratic red tape. To critics, it's a descent into chaos, a mercenary free-for-all on US soil. BBC's Washington Bureau called it America's boldest flirtation with privatized warfare since Blackwater. Defense News warned that it could shatter accountability. Who would monitor civilian militias armed with drones, guided missiles, and legal immunity? It's Pandora's box, said a retired general. Once opened, every war becomes someone's business model. Still, the idea gained momentum after an ICE convoy was ambushed near Laredo, killing 3 federal officers. That night, President Trump convened an emergency briefing vowing the full spectrum of American power would be unleashed against the cartels. Inside the White House, aides discussed hybrid solutions, partnerships with tech firms, defense contractors, and even former Special Forces veterans. By May, Al Jazeera reported sightings of unmarked enforcement units operating along the border wearing no agency insignia but equipped with advanced counter-drone gear. In Mexico City, outrage erupted. DW documented massive protests outside the U.S. Embassy with banners reading "No mercenaries on our soil." Mexican officials condemned the move as a violation of sovereignty. Yet behind closed doors, several Mexican governors quietly welcomed the idea, desperate to reclaim towns swallowed by cartel control. The Guardian drew stark parallels to historical precedents from East India Company expeditions to modern private security operations in Iraq. Each time private warfare expanded state power at the cost of public trust. Empires don't collapse from invasion, one columnist wrote. They decay when violence becomes profitable. But the allure of results remains powerful. Since the program's trial phase began under the Trump administration's Homeland Response Initiative, Defense News estimates over 100 cartel-linked warehouses were raided within 6 months. None of the strikes were publicly acknowledged. Efficiency without transparency, remarked a BBC analyst. That's how democracies erode. Globally, the trend fits a pattern. In Ukraine, Western private drone companies now play critical battlefield roles. In the Middle East, Iranian proxies operate under semi-official militias. In the Pacific, China's maritime militia blurs the line between fisherman and soldier. The privatization of warfare is no longer theory, it's policy. Back in Texas, a Border Patrol veteran watches black SUVs roll past their windows tinted their mission classified. He mutters quietly, "They say they're here to help, but who are they really?" As the desert winds carry the echoes of rotors and engines, one haunting question lingers: when war becomes a business, who profits from the peace? From the trenches of Donetsk to the deserts of Texas, the war playbook is being rewritten. What happens along the Rio Grande no longer stays there, it becomes a template for future conflicts. According to Reuters and Jane's Defense Weekly, analysts inside NATO's Joint Innovation Command have been closely studying America's border drone operations. The combination of real-time surveillance, AI-guided interception, and hybrid public-private enforcement mirrors strategies used in Ukraine's defense grids. One European official described it as the Western Hemisphere's laboratory for low-cost asymmetric warfare. In Ukraine, small units equipped with tablet-controlled drones have stalled Russian armor worth millions. In Israel, the ongoing Iran-backed proxy conflicts show how precision technology and propaganda intertwine, each missile launch filmed, edited, and uploaded within minutes to influence global opinion. The US-Mexico front now exhibits the same digital theater TikTok clips of drone chases edited with cartel music circulating faster than official briefings. As DW noted, the camera has become a weapon as powerful as the rifle. But these lessons extend deeper. The Defense News Security Review of 2025 concludes that America's southern border is the new hybrid frontier, a fusion of counterterrorism, digital warfare, and domestic policing. Drones once deployed over Fallujah now patrol the skies of El Paso. Algorithms designed to track ISIS communications are being retrained to detect cartel slang. The line between external war and internal security has vanished. Globally, this echoes China's own doctrine of civil-military fusion. Reports from The Guardian indicate Beijing has begun exporting surveillance systems capable of both civilian monitoring and battlefield reconnaissance systems that may already have filtered into Latin America through commercial intermediaries. The irony analysts say is striking tools meant to protect the US are evolving from the same technological ecosystems its rivals helped build. The BBC's diplomatic correspondents add that European intelligence agencies now fear similar spillovers. Spanish and Italian ports report drone smuggling attempts linked to Balkan trafficking networks carbon copies of Mexico's tactics. Meanwhile, Iran's Revolutionary Guard has allegedly offered technical guidance to Latin American cartels on long-range drone navigation, effectively globalizing what began as a regional crime war. Yet amid this geopolitical web, the human consequences remain stark. Families in both Texas and Tamaulipas now live under constant skyward fear. Farmers refuse to work at night. Children mistake surveillance drones for stars. Hospitals near McAllen report rising trauma linked to drone-related anxiety, echoing civilian exhaustion seen in Ukraine's cities after months of air alerts. The Al Jazeera Investigative Bureau summed it up in one haunting line. Every drone strike breeds another recruit, every flash in the sky another myth. Fear becomes the fuel of perpetual war. As policymakers debate budgets and strategy, one question lingers in the Pentagon corridors: is America adapting to the future of conflict or building a future no one can escape? The hum of propellers over Texas answers in silence. Night falls again over the Rio Grande. The floodlights sweep across barren fields, cutting through dust and heat. Somewhere in that shimmering darkness, an invisible engine hums. No one knows who controls it, cartel, military, or machine. As BBC News reported last week, the US-Mexico frontier has become both a battlefield and a laboratory. Agents patrol with night vision goggles, thermal scanners, and anti-drone rifles, but fatigue is setting in. Families on both sides live in fear not of invasion, but of uncertainty. A single flash in the sky can send entire neighborhoods diving for cover. In McAllen, Texas, school children are taught aerial safety drills mirroring air raid lessons from a different century. For President Donald Trump, the mission remains clear deterrence through strength. According to Reuters, his administration has tripled the deployment of National Guard units, accelerated wall fortifications, and approved direct drone strikes on cartel vessels in the Gulf of Mexico. America will not be terrorized by traffickers, he declared during a rally in Houston. But even within his own party, concerns grow about the costs, not only in dollars, but in democracy. The Guardian warns that a militarized homeland risks blurring constitutional boundaries. Surveillance once confined to battlefields now watches American towns. In an internal memo leaked to DW Homeland Security, legal advisors questioned whether the new AI scanning protocols violate civilian privacy protections. The response from Washington was terse. The threat justifies the means. Meanwhile, Mexico teeters between cooperation and collapse. Al Jazeera's Mexico City Bureau reports that cartel factions have begun targeting journalists and activists documenting U.S. raids, while in Ciudad Juarez, entire families vanish amid nightly drone hunts. We live between two wars, says one local teacher, the cartels below and the machines above. Strategically, America's dominance has grown, but so has its isolation. Latin American allies accuse Washington of unilateral aggression. Beijing's state media mocks the drone wall, calling it proof that the U.S. fears its own shadow. Yet inside the Pentagon, officials defend the policy as a necessary evolution, one that keeps American influence alive while adversaries adapt. Jane's Defense Weekly frames it differently. Every frontier is a reflection of empire. What the U.S. does on its border today defines how it will fight everywhere tomorrow. That definition now includes AI-driven surveillance, preemptive strikes, and a doctrine of instant retaliation tools that blur the moral compass of modern warfare. And amid it all, the people endure. In Texas, parents tuck their children beneath windows, facing away from the border. In Sonora, mothers whisper lullabies under skies filled with blinking red lights. On both sides, faith mixes with fatigue. A grandmother in Reynosa told DW reporters, "We pray for silence now. Even silence feels like peace." But peace is fragile when technology knows no allegiance. Each drone destroyed inspires two more. Each raid deepens resentment. The border, once a line of defense, has become a mirror reflecting not only violence, but the choices of a nation defining its own identity through war. And as the hum rises once more above the desert, one final question remains: when machines inherit the battlefield, who will inherit the blame? The 2025 US-Mexico border conflict has evolved into a full-scale technological war. Mexican cartels now deploy explosive-laden drones, forcing the Trump administration to militarize the frontier under Operation Sentinel Sky. The response is fierce AI-driven surveillance, joint National Guard operations, and preemptive strikes. Yet as cartels adapt with hybrid guerrilla tactics and international support from Iranian encryption to Chinese drone parts, corruption and fear erode trust on both sides of the border. Senator Mike Lee's privateer proposal divides Washington, symbolizing America's growing reliance on privatized warfare. Analysts warn the conflict mirrors global battlefields in Ukraine, Gaza, and the South China Sea, revealing how asymmetric warfare and propaganda redefine modern power. Civilians live in constant anxiety as drones blur the boundary between soldier and machine. Strategically, the US strengthens control, but at the cost of liberty and moral clarity.